Hey guys, welcome back to the second part of how to set up your own custom boss fight in Fortnite Creative. And this time we'll be setting up our abilities and spells, and in the meanwhile, you'll pick up a few tips and tricks on the way. So, if you didn't see the first part of this video series, I suggest checking that out first, as I explain in that one how to set up this mechanism that we have here, that will constantly cast a new random spell and then go on a timeout till casting the next one. So make sure you have that set up, as we'll continue using it right now. So, recap on what we did last episode. We have a trigger here that calls the RNG device behind it. That one picks a random tile right next to it. Every one of these tiles have two triggers. One that will activate the music sequencer behind it, and another one that will recall the activation trigger that then goes on a timeout till it's time to cast the next ability. Even if you're not interested in exactly these abilities, how they work, I still hope you stick around till the end because I give a lot of small hints and tips and tricks to use devices in a way you didn't think that were possible before. And since we have 4 abilities set up at this moment, in this video we'll implement one terrain-based ability, one zombie or sentry one, I don't know yet, one teleporter one, and then the last one will be with a damage over time zone. This way we have a mix of a bit of everything and you have a general idea of how you can make your own ability or spell or whatever you want. You can pretty much invent any ability you want, and I have a really cool video coming after we finish setting up the entire boss that will help you pick and invent your own spells. Also, before anything, I set the delay between spells to 20 seconds to give us enough time to test each ability. I did that in between videos. First ability that we'll do is one that uses the teleporter and a moving zone. So go to your mechanic setup and go to your first ability sequencer. What we'll do is when the boss casts this ability, teleport the player to the lower ground here, right in front of the boss, and then send a slow moving damage zone to the player, so that you have to parkour your way back up before the zone reaches you. Shouldn't be that hard. So first we'll need a teleporter. Grab one of these and throw it down on the lower part of the boss. We know from our billboards that the first free channel we have is channel 7. If you're doubting, you can always fly back and go check. That's why it's important to always keep track. So in the configuration of your teleporter, set the group and target group to none, the visibility to hidden. We can leave the effect and sounds or turn them off, whatever you prefer. And now go to your first sequencer and throw down a trigger in the very beginning. Ignore all of the options and just scroll all the way to the bottom and set the when triggered transmit on to channel 7, which is our teleport channel. Now, before testing this out, we'll go to our RNG device and change both the upper value and the length of the zone to 1. This way, it will just always trigger the same ability that we're setting up, making it easier to test. Now, let's test. And while the game starts, I'm already going to tell you that this isn't gonna work. But I want to show you guys why. So the game starts, we press the start button we set up in the previous video. If you then look down, you will see that after the short delay, we set the first sequencer activates. And the trigger in it as well. Well, nothing happened. So we didn't get teleported yet. And why is that? Because we're missing a step. If we go back to editing and hover over the teleport to when receiving from option on our teleporter itself, we can read the description says, teleport the triggering player to this teleporter when receiving on this channel. But since the trigger and therefore channel get called from a sequencer, the teleporter doesn't know which player to teleport. So what we need to do for that is add a device in between that connects the player to the teleporter. The easiest way to do that is with a perception trigger. You can also use other devices like class selectors or mutator zones, but the perception trigger is the easiest. So throw it down in the middle of your fighting rounds. Walk back and forward to your camera to see the blue zone, indicating how far it can see, and make sure all your fighting area is included. If not, you might have to move it a little bit around to make sure that no matter where you are, you will always get triggered. Set the trigger sound, the effects, and the visibility to disabled, and also disable it on game start. And we'll enable it when receiving from channel 7, which is called by the sequencer. Then when it's enabled, it will automatically see everybody in the room, so then set the when device sees a player transmit on to channel 8. Now go back to your teleporter and update it to channel 8. So instead of teleporting the player right away from the sequencer activates the perception trigger, which sees all players and then sends them to the teleporter. Now that we threw the player down there, we'll quickly set up a barrier here as well, so he can't run to the boss. Make sure block fire is set to off, or we later won't be able to damage the boss in the next video. And make sure it's high enough and wide enough. And we'll also set up the parkour the player has to do to get back up. I have that ready here prepared, but you can make that as easy or difficult as you want yourself. Now, last part of our first ability is the moving zone. So fly under the boss and place a platform. Then place a sequencer on top of it. Set the length, the height, and the width according to the distance from the boss or sequencer up until the teleporter. Then lower the BPM a little bit to the speed you want the zone to move. I'll put this to like 40 at the moment, but we can later fine-tune that. And the same with the damage. You can set it to medium now, but we can change that later or whatever you want, depending on the style and health of the player and the boss. Now lastly, set the start sequence when receiving from to channel 9, which is our first next free channel. Also, fly back to the perception trigger and set the disable when receiving from to channel 9 as well, so that after the player gets teleported, the sequencer starts and the perception trigger gets disabled again. Otherwise, it would just keep teleporting the player back down there. Now, in your ability sequencer downstairs, throw down another trigger in the very end of your sequencer that will trigger on channel 9. Okay, time to test this out, our very first ability. Start the game and press the button to start the fight. After the delay we set the boss, we'll cast a random ability, but because we changed the zone and length to 1, it will only cast this first ability. Perception trigger gets activated, everybody in the room gets teleported to the teleporter down there, and the zone starts moving towards you, so you better start parkouring back up there. And once the zone starts, it will also disable the perception trigger so it doesn't throw you back down there again. Perfect. Now before we move on to our next ability, there's two things we need to do. First of all, add a new billboard behind the sequencer to write down your channels. Channel 7 activates the perception trigger, Channel 8 teleports the player, Channel 9 sends a zone and deactivates the trigger. And the next thing we'll have to do is move our RNG device one tile, so that we can set up the next ability without worrying about what is already done. So set your grid snap to 1 and then cut and paste it one tile to the right. Okay, second ability. Let's do something easy now, like zombies. So we know that this ability will start with channel 4. Grab a creature placer and put it on your fighting area. Set the activate on game phase to never, to not automatically spawn them at the start of the game. Change the spawn only if needed to off. And this will make sure that if a previous creature got stuck somewhere and isn't doing anything, that when this ability gets called again, it will respawn the creature. And lastly, set the spawn when receiving from to channel 4. Now just choose which kind of fiend you want to use. Let's say the poison fiends. But you can later customize their settings like damage and speed by using the creature manager, but for demo, it doesn't really matter. And then copy and paste it however many times you want. Let's start. Okay, click the button, face Johnny. 20 seconds later, after the delay, our 4 zombies will spawn. Nice. Well, not really, too easy, too boring. Let's mix it up. And say zombies that spawn are random between poison and ranged. So fly back down to our ability sequencer and replace the sequencer by a random number generator. Set the following options. Upper limit to 2, or if you want more than 2 zombie options, then set it higher. Roll time to instant. Zone to left so that we can add triggers. Length to 2, and activate when receiving from to channel 4. Now add a trigger in both of these tiles of the random number generator zone, and set one to transmit on channel 10 and the other one to channel 11, our next 3 channels. Now fly back up to Johnny in the fighting area. The poison zombies we set up before no longer need to spawn on channel 4, but now on channel 10, so update that. And then copy it one more time, but change the channel to 11. And the type to whatever you want it to be. Like I said before, let's take ice ranged because they're really cool. And then the same as before, copy and paste however many times you want. Now start the game, and after the delay, the zombies will spawn, but it's randomized which type. That's more like it. Okay, ability tree. Again, first, before we do that, a billboard for the previous one. Channel 10 is poison zombies, channel 11 is ice ranged zombies. And again, move the RNG device that casts our abilities by 1 to the right. Next up, let's do something with a damage over time effect. Go underneath your fighting area, preferably at least 2 tiles down, and locate the middle, both in the length and the width. And then place a damage zone on top of it, and configure it. Okay, options. Zone visibility to yes, because we want to see the actual damage volume. Width, depth and height to the size of your fighting grounds. For me that's 7 and 5, and since we're 2 tiles down the zone, it needs to be at least 3 high to reach the player upstairs. And the damage type to damage over time. Let's say 10 damage every second. Then make sure it's disabled at game start. And finally set the unable when receiving from to channel 12, the next one in line, and disable when receiving from channel 13. Now fly back down, and in our third sequencer, throw down a trigger in the beginning and another one at the very end. The beginning one will transmit on channel 12, which will activate the damage over time zone that we just bound. And then the end one on channel 13, which will disable it again. Now the last thing we need to do is invent a way to stop the damage. In the Sunny map, that was the air vents that you could jump on, but let's do something more fun here. But before we do that, let's slow down the BPM of the sequencer a little bit. I put it here to about 30 to make the ability last long enough. The higher you set this number, the shorter the actual ability will take. Fly back to where you place the damage zone, grab a mutator zone, and place it down right next to it. Just like before, set the width, depth, and height to cover everything up on the fighting surface as well. And then disable it at game start, just like before. And we're going to do something really fun here. We're going to set up a small task that you need to emote to stop the damage zone. Instead of keeping you in the air, this might be a fun alternative. So to do that, we need to enable the zone at the same time when the damage starts, which is channel 12. And disable it again at the same time as well. So bind the disable when receiving from to channel 13 as well. And finally, set the on player starts emoting, transmit on channel 13, which will stop the damage and disable both zones. If they don't do that, then again at the end of the sequencer, they will deactivate anyway. And that should be it. We could set up a system where if you don't stop emoting, the damage will start again, but since in the next video we're going to implement phases and raging and it gets more complicated, it might be a little bit complicated moving or shooting while emoting, so let's just disable it when you emote. Start the game, wait for the delay, and as soon as the damage starts sticking, emote, and the damage stops. We can add some extra indicators with particles or HUD devices, whatever you want, but that's up to you. Now before the last ability, again, first billboards, we gotta keep track of those channels. Channel 12, enable damage and the mutator. And channel 13 disables the damage zone and the mutator again on emote or on end. Again, move the RNG device one tile to the right for the last part, the terrain destroying one. Now first of all, if you made it this far in the video, I want to say thank you so much for all the support. And if you're looking for someone to type in the item shop, please consider using code Fortnite Creative Tutorials. Anyway, now that you're ready for something really advanced, because you've made it this far in the video, terrain destroying. How we'll set this up is the boss will destroy some terrain tiles 4 times. And thank God that the newest device, the trick tile, it got a lot easier than what I had to do for Sunny with explosive devices. So, we know that every time this ability gets called, the music sequencer will start. We then have 2 options here. One, a complicated one, and a simple one. The simple one will randomly pick some tiles and destroy them. The complicated one will always follow the same pattern of which tiles it will destroy every next time the ability is called. And since we're already going pretty advanced, I'm going to stick with the easier way for now. So what we're going to do is delete the sequencer for this last ability and replace it with another RNG device. Set the value limit and length to 4, the zone to left, roll time to instant, and now very important, set the pick each number once to yes. This means that once a number is picked, it will not be picked again until everything else is called at least once, giving us a really easy way to destroy some extra terrain every time this last ability gets called, and never call the same channel again to destroy the same tiles. And finally, set the activate when receiving from to channel 6. Now place a trigger in each one of these grid tiles of the random number generator zone, and set the when triggered transmit on to channel 14, the next one to 15, the next one to 16, and the last one to 17. Now fly back up to the fighting grounds, grab a trick tile and put it on a tile you want to destroy. Set the activation delay to the time you want to give the player to avoid this tile. So I'd say 2 or 3 seconds should be enough to indicate which tile is going to explode. But you can change that, up it or low it as you want. Set the trigger on player contact to no, and the trigger when receiving from to channel 14. and then go under that square and set up something that will damage the player. So just block him in, and then either use traps, or in this case, I'll just set up another zone that does damage over time. And what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna add some prop here that if they fall in, they can parkour or jump their way out. But be creative and set up anything you want. I'm also using these normal walls for the demo, but you can use custom terrain pieces to make it look really pretty and natural. And now just repeat this process and make sure that there's at least one trick tile device for every channel 14, 15, 16, and 17. Okay, time to test. As you can see, the tile will start bouncing and turn red for 2 to 3 seconds, and then disappear. You can also use an explosive device if you want, but it's easier with these trick tiles now that we have them. And now to close all of this off, all we have to do is move our main RNG device 3 tiles to the left again, and we're all done. A new spell will automatically be called every 20 seconds. You can use the sequencers to add extra triggers, and use particles to make your own custom indicators. Be creative, I know you are. And if you want to implement more abilities, then just up the length of your RNG device by 1, and you can add another sequencer and repeat this whole process. Thank you so much for sticking around till the end. If you feel like buying something, then please consider using code Fortnite Creative Tutorials in the item shop to help me grow my channel. It's the best way to support me. So thank you so much to everyone who's been slamming those like buttons and who's been typing in the code. Next video will be the last part in the series, in which we'll actually set up with damaging the boss in different phases, indicators, and enraging. So stay tuned for that, and I'll see you guys soon.